Hello. Yes, we are about to start, and we are wondering if it is fine with you if we move from the podium that is a little bit maybe too formal for us and gather around a table with you all. Is that all right? Are your mics all working? I'm sure yes, so we can go ahead. Yes.
Did I give you a card?
Yes.
I did. Okay. All right.
So we're moving to the table?
Yeah, we can.
So we're moving. Okay. All right.
All right.
È già finito?
Finito.
Ai ai ai, la
Now
sessione
we're
senza
going to move formally around the table. I think it's better. So, hello, hi everybody. We're here with the Dynamic Coalition of Public Access. I'm Esmeralda Moscatelli from IFLA, the International Federation of Library Association, and we have here a heterogeneous panel that is going to discuss modalities and example of public access throughout the world, and because it's very informal and very small, and we would like for you to participate and ask questions or make remarks and as we go along. So I have here with me on Maria Garrido from Tasha, researchers from the Technology and Social Change from the University of Washington. And she will be talking about the development access to information, which has been released this year, and the role and the function of public access within the report. Then I have Janet Sawaya from IFL that has a wide experience. Hello again. So I have Janet. Thank you. I have Janet Sawaya from IFO. She has wide experience in many countries throughout the world, both with IFO and the Gates Foundation, and she will be talking about barriers to public access. Today, just okay. I'm gonna stand. All right.
You have to present it in the red light.
I know we did it, but it's not working.
Yes, it's working perfectly well.
All right.
Oh no.
That's one of
One,
the
one,
barriers.
one, two,
Okay,
one, two,
here
one,
we are,
two.
the third microphone. Then we're trying to connect with David Ordóñez, who's a leader at IFLA, and is from Colombia, and he will provide a fresh approach to the idea of the concept of public access in Latin America. And then we have Winston Roberts, which is currently senior advisor of the National Library of New Zealand, and he has a mixed, he worked for IFLA for many, many years in the past, and he has both experience in national and public libraries, and he's here to give us a perspective from that part of the world. And then my colleague over there, Stephen Weiber from IFLA, is trying to connect David from IFLA offices in the and so I think I would start with Maria, and then
before you start, because we're such a small group, I don't
Yes.
see many faces from last year. I'm just wondering if people can briefly go around and introduce themselves and give us a little bit of information about why you're interested in this, in particular because this, obviously, this intersection on internet governance and libraries isn't a big world, and so it'd be interesting to know what others' interests are in the topic.
Okay. Hello, good morning. My name is actually good afternoon. My name is Karel Douglas. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. My interest here is I'm on the board of directors of the National Library System in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm actually here for other reasons, but I did see this session and I thought it would be very useful to come and hear what's happening since it does impact on my work as a board member. Thank you.
Do you want to, sorry, just to go?
Hello everyone, my name is Carlos Rey Moreno. I work for the Association for Progressive Communications, and I'm here to try to understand, well, I'm coordinating a program in community networks and local access, and I would like to explore a bit more the potential of public libraries as the starting point of a community network or a local access initiative in the Global South. Thank you.
Boris Engelson, I am someone who disagrees with anyone and on anything, even before I hear what you say, especially within the UN system, because I know more or less in advance what people will advocate. I'm surprised that I have to introduce me again, because this very morning we had an in-depth and comprehensive discussion encompassing all aspects of library activities vis-à-vis the internet from 10:58 to 10:59 this morning with Esmeralda, so I thought that we had exhausted the topic. Why I'm interested, it's because for me, and maybe I am a little bit silly, I thought that the internet, the web, basically was a library issue. And in the past 30 years, I have always hoped that one day it will be addressed as a library issue. And each time I see this, what you call mirage, this illusion, that maybe this will be the great discussion about semantics and the universal cataloging, or I mean the ultimate library implemented by the net. The net is just the implementation. I run across the world and try to see if the miracle will occur.
I am Ruth Wenger, and I am a Swiss librarian, and I am here just for interest.
Francisco Rocha from Portugal. I am part of a group called Copy Fighters. We are a group of young people who work on the topic of copyright, and we are part of the generation who was born with access to the biggest library ever, the internet, and that's why I'm here.
Hello, my name is Maxime Zeller. I'm also part of the Copy Fighters group. I'm from France. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shin Takamura. I'm from Japanese government of ICT, and I interest impact that internet growth to public access. So I want to start to study today. So I join this session. Thank you.
My name is Jean. I'm librarian, and I'm part of CGI steering committee, the team of a technical advisory team, and I'm here just to hear and follow the discussion.
I'm Jan Hopmans, also with the Copy Fighters from the Netherlands. I'm here because I'm generally interested in open knowledge and access to information, just like a previous colleague of mine said. Yeah, we have the biggest library in the world that's accessible, and we're really worried about the impact that copyright is going to have on the internet.
Hello, my name is Silvia. I am also part of a young movement of copyfighters, and I am interested more particularly in digital collections of museums, archives, libraries, and galleries, and their public domain status and availability for creative reuse for creators. So basically in education and increasing the awareness of how to find such content.
Afternoon. My name is Andreas Lamini. I come from Swaziland. I work in the Ministry of ICT, so I want to get ideas in terms of how to use libraries to bring more access to the communities.
Hi, I'm Mei-Lin Fang from the People-Centered Internet, and I'm also Vice Chair for Internet Inclusion for the IEEE, and I'm very interested in public access and the role that libraries can play.
Okay, so do you want to say something very quickly? Do you want to introduce yourself and then we can start? Not really. Okay, perfect. So. So we'll start with Maria Garrido from Tasha, and then I would say maybe each speaker would have a maximum time of 10 minutes, really, maximum, or less. And yeah. So let's start with Maria.
Thank you very much. So I'm a researcher at the University of Washington, and this year we started a project. As you all know, access. Oh, do I need to use this? Or can I? Yeah. I'm a short person, and I'm like feel like this over the table. This is weird. Sorry. Yeah. See. It's on. Okay. As you all know, the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. It's the first time where public access to information actually is codified in one of the targets, and it's target 16.10. So it's not the only target where information is mentioned as an important conduit to achieve the goals. There's 14 other targets where information is specifically called out. So within the context of the UN 2030 agenda, we wanted to understand and assess the extent to which access to information, and I'll define access to information the way we define it here, can promote and help advance those targets, and the role of public libraries and libraries in general, public libraries specifically, in helping advance those goals. As I'm preaching to the choir, but libraries in many countries of the world play a very important role in different aspects that specifically are relevant to the SDGs. So I guess we started this project asking, well, can access to information really create more socially inclusive societies? I'm sorry, I'm giving you my back. No, I don't care. I just don't know how to coordinate microphone and people. And if so, like you said, working your generation, right, given the unprecedented ability we have today to share, to create, to exchange, is it possible to create a more inclusive society, better opportunity for young people, better opportunity for women and other people that perhaps do not have the same chances that others have, and sponsor civic life in our communities? For us, access to information is the rights and capacity to use, create, and share information in ways that are relevant for people's in everyday lives, right? So there are many ways in which information is minimal, and when I say information, I don't mean just the access to information. It's the technology, the social context, the legal aspect that you guys pointed out when you introduced yourselves, and so it's from that multidimensional perspective. We selected 17 indicators, and people working in the UN system know there are very few indicators today that can help us understand from a global perspective the role of access to information beyond connectivity. There's very little information on capabilities. There's very little information on the legal aspect. There is very little information on gender statistics, but we work with the indicators available today from 4 different dimensions. 1, the connectivity, which are the most readily available. 2, the capabilities of people. 3, the legal context, and 4, the social context. And I feel a little bit out of place trying to convince in this table people why public access to information is critical, because all of you know. But today in the world, we have 80% of the world covered with a 3G network, and only 36% of people in less developed countries are able to access the internet from a connectivity perspective. Forget about knowing how to, or doing things with it, or being able and free to use that to advance their communities and societies. So that's the first step, the first line in support of public access. Two, of course, the gender gap, right? Today, even in countries where you would not expect that gap exists, there's a ginormous gap. Only 85 countries, starting from there, gather data on women and the internet. So what we have today in terms of understanding of, you know, percentage of women and men that use the internet comes from 85 countries in the world, that's it. So the gender divide starts from there in knowing how many women, and it's very, of course, the gender gap is ginormous. It goes, even Turkey has the biggest gender gap, running at almost 20%. We also know that from the very little data available, that young people today in many parts of the world, especially in the global south, are more active using the internet, in social media, are more active taking advantage of online courses for education and employability, and are less participant in political aspects of internet, especially blogs and forums and other civic platforms. And that has to do, of course, not only with the lack of civic engagement from young people in these countries, but from the legal space that perhaps does not allow them to participate without political consequences of repression. And I think I just want to conclude by saying that it is critical for us, and once again, in this table, there's no need for preaching to the choir, but the component of public access to the internet needs to be a key political priority, and they cannot pay only lip service to this area. It's critical to advance access to information from a rights-based perspective, right, where access to information includes economic rights, political rights, human rights. All of them encompass one group of rights that are indivisible. And with that, I'll let for the librarians and library experts in the panel to share their experience.
Yes, I think maybe we can move to Janet, and we'll keep questions at the end, or I think it would be best.
Okay, my name's Janet Sawaya, and I'm from Electronic Information for Libraries. IFL and IFLA were the founders of this dynamic coalition, and it was founded based on the idea that public libraries are the vehicle for public access to knowledge and information, which is the critical purpose of the internet. And each year we talk about, you know, we come to this and we're trying to convince others that public access is critical, and it's a really challenging issue. And so this year, when we were brainstorming for this session, we said, okay, what do we need to be focusing on? And one of the areas that we really need to be focusing on is not just saying public access is important in order for people to get online, because it is, but also what are the policy issues that need to be addressed in order to make public access available to people. Libraries are important vehicles for public access because they're one of the few institutions that are free and open to the public throughout the world. IFL works in over 40 countries, and previously I was working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Global Libraries Initiative, and we worked in dozens and dozens of countries and did research on even more countries. And in that context, we also did research on how and whether there are other places to do public access, and the conclusion generally has been public libraries provide the best environment because of infrastructure, because of trained staff. So what are the policy issues that need to be addressed? Well, and in that context, we have to look at it in two areas. One is in terms of just providing support to public access. And from that perspective, we often talk about universal service funds or other types of vehicles. Government programs, I'm assuming people know what universal service funds are. Briefly, they're a way that the government taxes often through telephone bills or other mechanisms, and then subsidizes, often through an E-rate, a discounted rate for schools, libraries, health institutions, others, discounted rate to the internet, as well as in some countries, providing the technology for public access as well. So there's that aspect of it. How do we actually get the technology out there? And I think because public access is actually on the decrease, this is an issue we need to continue to raise. More and more it becomes a discrepancy between those who have access to some type of device and those who do not, and even more so those who have access to the device on a phone or access on a phone versus those who have some other type of access, because we know that the limits of access on a phone. And it does not allow for full development of access to knowledge and information in the way that access to some other device does. So there's the one part of the policy, which is how do we get people the technology and the internet access that they need? And one critical way is through some type of universal service fund in which the government is helping to subsidize as a public good access to the internet and access to technology. Then the other policy area that I think is critical for us to talk about is the role that public access to knowledge and information plays in all the different development goals that governments have, particularly the SDGs. And so, for example, we're working in, as IFL, we're working in about 10 countries across Africa, and we did a public study in 5 of those, and across the board, the African countries in which we did the study, there was acknowledgement by public officials that access to the internet is critical for them to achieve their policy goals. But yet, rarely is access to information, knowledge, or the internet mentioned as an integral to various policy goals. And so part of our advocacy is to get access to information and the internet mentioned explicitly so that when policies are being implemented, whether it be an education policy, a health policy, an agriculture policy, an economic development policy, that public access, and particularly libraries, are mentioned as critical partners to making those policy goals happen. So I'm trying to make it quick because we were supposed to end, and I'll just leave it there.
So I just for time purposes, do we have the remote participants, Stephen? Do we? Okay, good. Now we go to Winston. Winston.
Thank you, Esmeralda. In view of the comments that people in this micro workshop have made, I can see that there's a strong bias towards younger people, and there's a strong bias towards non-government and civil society academic stakeholders, and not so many people from governments here. And there's also, I get the impression that there's also an expectation that, an impression on the part of everyone in this round table that public access to information in libraries is something that we still have to fight for. That's something that concerns me, and I'll tell you why. Because it's all been said before. I was here in 2003 for the World Summit on the Information Society as a New Zealand government representative, and I spent months during 2003 in all the preparatory committees working up to the outcome documents for the 2003, the first summit. And I personally negotiated and argued for expressions of support for access to information through libraries, and they are all in the Geneva Principles 2003. And I would like to suggest maybe the people at the top desk, could you possibly call up from ITU, Google, the Geneva Principles and put on the screen for us if you could go to ITU.org and the WSIS, the original WSIS, and get Geneva Principles and call up a section of those principles that referred to the action line on access to information. And then while I'm talking, maybe if one of you could do that. If it's not possible, don't worry. What I mean is, at the Geneva Summit, we talked about freedom of expression, freedom of access to information. We referred to Article 19. We debated the need for providing information to populations, and bearing in mind, of course, that in those days there were no such things as smartphones. Smartphones are new inventions that came along since 2003. But we talked about the use of mobile phones in dense urban environments, in remote urban rural communities, in the bush. We talked about the use of mobile phones to leap over problems of fixed line technology and to put information out there to populations. We talked about access to information in public libraries, in schools, in post offices. There's an old word for you. In public access to information in government-funded, community-funded institutions at local grassroots level. All of that was explained, was discussed, debated extensively in the first WSIS, the first World Summit on the Information Society, 2003. It's all there. And the reasons for debating those questions were, alongside internet governance, was that I mean the assembled states parties to the summit, we agreed that the purpose of that summit was to not only discuss internet governance in the technical terms, but also to discuss the reasons for being concerned about why the internet should be well governed. In other words, it should be a platform for putting out honest, clear information, for economic reasons, for educational reasons, for scientific and cultural reasons. And that's why UNESCO, for example, was given responsibility for applying a number of action lines, just as other UN agencies were given devolved responsibility for other action lines. UNESCO had responsibility particularly for the ones relating to access to information and culture. Another reason another important point that I recall from 2003 is that we discussed the importance of bringing indigenous communities or rather, turn it around, giving indigenous communities access to the internet and protecting the expression of indigenous cultures on the internet. That's also an action line in the Geneva Principles. It seems to me, the reason for talking about that at great length is it seems to me that many people now do not know about the Geneva Principles. They happened before the time that you began to take an interest in these questions. They also may have been overlooked by the people in ITU who have gone on developing internet governance since then. But the working group on internet governance that was officially launched at the Tunis summit, the second summit, was started off in Geneva 2003. So there's history there, and I don't think we should forget history. In fact, I would urge you to refer back to the principles as the beginning of everything for this whole process, for this debate. Libraries were mentioned in that World Summit document. It's not only about bits and bytes, it's not only about the mechanics of the internet, it's about the social consequences and outcomes of access to information, the reasons why we do it. As who was it from the Internet Society yesterday at the opening? Was it Catherine Brown, was it? Mentioned that the Internet is our life now, and that's absolutely true, and it always was true. All our lives are on the Internet, and that's why we had the World Summits, to talk about how we can organise our lives, how we can defend against hate speech, how we can defend against religious intolerance, how we can extend access to the Internet to deprived communities, indigenous communities, people who are not in the highly industrialised world, so that everyone has a chance to improve their education on the platform which is the Internet, to improve their economic life chances by getting an education on that platform which is the Internet, and then by using the Internet to develop small SMEs, small industries. I'm talking too much, but I think you get the point that it's all been said before, and I think I'd like to encourage you to look back at some of those older texts and remind some of the people in the ITU and other UN agencies that what they're saying is in fact not new. They need to apply what was discussed before.
Thank you, Winston. And let's hear from David. David, are you there? It's not.
Hi, sorry. Well, I am David. I am a Colombian librarian, and thanks for this help to can participate in the dynamic coalition. So I'm going to speak about two cases. What's happening right now in Colombia. The first one is the peace process and the mobile libraries for the peace. Imagine that we were in war for 50 years, 50 years. It means that the half of our country is not discovered yet in an institutional way. The people live in this small village, but the government cannot be part of this process. So after the peace process, we have like a new country for discover. The Ministry of Culture is implementing the mobile libraries for peace. So in 20 towns, like created towns for the people who is reintegrating from the guerrilla, the Colombian guerrilla, to the society, they have the opportunity to access to a mobile library with technology, with laptops, with e-readers, with screens. And this is a big challenge, because imagine that these people that since they were a child, they have only in mind that they have to carry on an arm, a gun or things like that. And now they discover all these diverse world, all these things in digital world. And this is an interesting case because it's happening right now. The people never touch a cell phone or an iPad that maybe it's very common for us. This is the first case. And the other case is the public policies for libraries. We have people, policy makers, that I am making laws for everybody. I am working specifically in copyright laws, but the thing is that in this case, the multi-stakeholder is not always something that you have for sure. The librarians, we should took a space here, because not always we are part of this conversation, and this beautiful idea of multi-stakeholder model is not always implemented in all spaces. So we have to find the way to interact with other stakeholders to see what can we do in these negotiations, in the implementations of technology, of policies. And the greatest thing with the libraries is that we are in the core of the society, in the communities. So we have like one part of us in the countryside and one hand of us in the capital, in the big capitals. So the challenges that we are facing is how can we meet the policymakers in the capitals and the people in the jungle that never heard about technology. So we have to think about how can we represent to the people who is never been connected or never had been present physically or never imagined that something what's happening now that I am in kilometers away from where you are sitting right now, this can be possible. And in the other hand, we as librarians can give access to the information. This is particularly challenging in places where there is no infrastructure at all. Imagine that we can give tablets, for example, to the people, but there is no internet connection there, or we don't have digital literacy for see how it works. So, and the thing is that internet is a good access provider for the information, but how can we go a step further for knowledge? Because the information, maybe it's in the books, it's in a CD, on a ebook, but knowledge is in the heart and in the brains of the people. So how can we try to meet these things together? And the other thing is that sometimes in copyright laws we are talking about clients. We are thinking about the people with money, the people who can buy for access to information, who can buy things. But what happened with the people that don't use money because the conditions were different? So, well, I know that I have no time, so that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Just I would ask you to contribute with question or comments, but my personal question to you all is like, so from what we discussed, things were said before, essentially. That's what Winston reminded us. Public access is important, is fundamental. Access to information, another milestone for us to be mindful users, consumers, and co-creators of what happens on the internet. So what is not really, my question is like, what are we doing sort of wrong? Why are we preaching, like to the choir all the time, and we don't move forward in meaningful way, engaging all the actors and essentially I think we are at a place where we don't need to justify or say, oh, public access is important. It's fundamental. It's done. It's a fact. How can we move forward? How can we engage all of you here and others to actually move forward and do something constructive and tangible? It's a little bit of a provocation. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm not sure my mic is on or off. My name is Bhaskar Bhattacharjee. I am from Bangladesh, and I'm a blind person here representing disability community as a Internet Society IGF ambassador. Friends, when we are talking about the library, when I was a student, I didn't get a single books in accessible format. So libraries is our dream. Just you never ever expect that a visually impaired people can go to a library. And digitalizations can give an opportunity for a person with visual disability to access books and information in alternative format. But unfortunately, the mainstreaming public library are not considering the needs of accessibility at all, I can say, in the developing world. Even though there is a standard like EPUB 3, DAISY, or other standards are available. So how we could deal this challenge to ensure accessible information and book for persons with we call print disability who are unable to read printed materials. Do you have any solution, or how you will engage the disability community in the, as a collaborative force with library related issues?
Is in the time before the internet, if you didn't have books in Braille, there was no accessibility. With the modern tools, you can have voice books, and that fixed the thing much better. So I'm not sure that this is an issue of non-access. It is, on the contrary, an example of obvious solutions.
May I jump in quickly? It's an important question, and Argentina with Tiflo Libros has a fantastic project which allows people to get access to books, to accessible format books. We have been working very closely with Tiflo Libros, with the World Blind Union, to make sure that the Treaty of Marrakesh, which removes the unnecessary copyright restrictions to access of books, which are increasingly inexplicable given that we can share books so easily online. We're working with them. We are pushing as hard as we can to make sure that member states implement this treaty without imposing additional costs, without imposing bureaucratic barriers, without trying to make things deliberately difficult, in order to make sure that access can be a reality and we can really take advantage of the potential of the internet to give every library with internet access, full access to books that everyone can read.
We encourage you, with or without Marrakesh, to go the right way.
We do, and if the law helps, that's great.
Yes, let somebody else. Otherwise, there is Winston here.
I think you have Pedro.
Oh, Pedro. Oh.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I don't know if for people with full blindness, but I'm aware of a project that maybe is not part of IFLA, but is in Cameroon. It's called the Le Pavillon Blanc. What they are doing is augmenting for people that are, I don't remember now the word, visual impaired? No. The people that have the skin whitish and the albino people that have visual impairments to a greater extent. So they are creating audiobooks and they are creating augmented text for people to go into these mobile libraries to actually access the books. But I don't know what is your background, and I don't know how much do you know of countries like Bangladesh or many other people in Africa or in the global south, where in rural areas there is no libraries, there is no devices where... No, there is not. There is not. There are more than 3 billion people that have not access to the internet.
You know, there was a foundation for the digital gap created in Geneva, and they had to close before they opened because it was a non-issue, and that was 20 years back.
Sorry, sir. I encourage you to come to many of the sessions that there is going to be today, tomorrow.
I also traveled to India. I have lived in Bangladesh. Okay. And, you know, if you are here just to have the voice of officialdom speak, you know, your view of the world is that the UN system, including UNESCO and IFLA, is here, and the real world is that. And I have the opposite view. And so there is no way we can even start the conversation as long as you address people, as you said. We all know that. No, I don't know what you know, and you don't know what I
know. One thing, from my user experience, there is number of digital books, but which are not accessible. Maybe they have converted from the JPG to PDF or something else. So maybe internet is a good help, but there is thousands of digital books which are fully inaccessible. There is international standard for making books accessible, but unfortunately, the public libraries, maximum public libraries, are not following the standard, like DAISY standard or EPUB, etc. So we need to consider the rights of reading rights of persons with visual disability. Even though there is a progress, but still we are behind. Thank you.
Winston, please go ahead.
I suggest we remind our ISOCs in our respective countries and remind our library associations to get the ear of the relevant ministers in our governments and remind those ministers that in the Geneva Principles 2003, it refers to providing effective assistive technologies for access to information. And also one of the outcomes of the First World Summit was a strong recommendation to governments that the internet should be taken full account of in integrated development policies, national and regional development policies. Integrated policies, okay? That means that policies should not only focus on improving GDP, but they should focus on improving education outcomes and improving soft infrastructure and not just cables, but infrastructure in terms of digital skills, listening posts in the bush, school libraries and things like that, for people at a sort of human level, a grassroots level, to learn about these things. But there needs to be integration, and these policies need to be developed by national governments. They are the only ones that can do that.
Sorry, your name again?
My name is Jan Hopmans. I want to make a small comment. I hope it's at least relevant in a bit. It's personally a bit my opinion and a bit of the copyfighters. I wanted to say to Houston, it was Winston, it worries me as well that you're telling me about that about 14, 15 years ago, politicians were already telling about their commitment to the sharing of knowledge and of the understanding of knowledge, and still nothing has happened. What worries me as well is like the internet started to be acceptable or integrated in society 30 years ago, and if you go to panels today and ask us some question, there's even people here that say they don't understand technology, which is maybe a little bit too late, because it's not just my generation, it's even your generation that has grown up with the internet. What I'm really positively surprised a little bit, because I went in here not expecting anything, that libraries are really thinking about the access to knowledge, and I think it's really an interesting process for libraries as well to make people understand the knowledge and showing the knowledge around to people around. And I'm wondering a little bit if maybe that's also a thing that libraries should educate other people, and not maybe the general public, but also the politicians in themselves, making them understand what they're actually talking about. And I'm afraid that when looking at the current reform, that copyright is going on, that it's becoming more and more restrictive, and politicians are restricting the access to information without realizing that they are doing so. And that limits, for example, access to the information on internet through link taxes and content filters that are being implemented right now, but also copyright rules, like the guy over there said, in which makes it impossible to adapt content to different environments, and also countries where the licensing fees may be too high to even considering buying the information in itself. It's not really a question, but I wanted to say that and show our perspective.
Yes, I think before giving you again the floor, I think what Winston was waving at you that Maria talked about is exactly in reports like this that we are trying to shape the mind and the approach to access of politicians. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, it's a long road, but at least it's something that it's worth trying, because I think, I don't know you, I mean, but I think when you are in the political spectrum, you have to sort of prove or show what are the benefits rather than what is the process. The process is something that we might design, but a politician might be more interested in what is the outcome of a certain, decision or a certain policy he adopts. So, yeah, if you want to become familiar with this, there will be something we can do. And Maria?
And not talking from as a representative of my university or in the partnership for this project, okay, it's a very personal. I am puzzled that today, 13, 14, 15 years of recognition of the importance of public access, the importance of access to the internet, we're still having the same conversations and even worse, right? So we live today in a world with 60% of the people that have access to the internet lives in countries where they are arrested or persecuted for speaking freely online. So I think your generation faces the biggest challenges, because even though you have all the opportunity and the platform to voice your opinion, I think there's and I don't understand what it is. I think it's a combination of things. The blocks that those voices actually are transformed into political actions. And I'd love to hear from your experience with copy fighters, especially because it's such a critical aspect of public access to information and such a complicated one because of the commercial front of it. In your experience, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that you face in transforming that voice and that level of participation into political action? We face the same problem too, trying to bring in libraries into the development conversation, right? So I'd love to hear from them first, if it's possible, if you guys don't. I mean, from the people in the office, but I point to the young people on that corner. But
like it's been said before, I think it's people don't think it's a big subject, but they don't realize it's very important, and politics don't really understand when we talked. They don't understand how it's working. So how can they vote without with knowing what actually is going to happen? And it feels like they are only listening to commercial lobbyists who want profit and not public access. And we are nothing when we can talk, but we are ignored. So that's a problem.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, and then we can. You've been patient enough.
Freelance journalists are also unheard voices.
Okay, yes. Well, the thing is that we in libraries facilitate the access to the information and the knowledge, but how can we don't think in libraries as just a house, walls and things that happen inside that. How can we make that the understanding of the things can go for policymakers, other civil society actors, or private sector? I mean, the libraries can do that and have the infrastructure for do that, but we need that many actors in many places use this infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you, David, and please.
Yes, basically I have 3 points to make. First, we all know that if you are poor or sick or in jail or whatever, you might have less access to books or music or whatever. This is not the issue here. We are Internet Governance Forum, and in my understanding, the core issue of Internet governance or Internet, just in short, is how do we deal with information in a world which has gone from information poor to information plenty? Of course, access does not mean the same thing when you have instantly 400 million documents or when you are a poor sheepherder in the middle of the Sahara, etc. So this is, to me, the first issue. And it can be translated into more specific issues. For instance, should there be a directive of IFLA to make all archives accessible urgently online, or should we wait 50 years, as we are doing now, for academics to make a career on each page of archive? Yes or no, I have no position, but that's one point. What is the future of the Dewey system, the decimal system, whichever classification system in the age of internet? Is the distinction between index, table of content, catalog still relevant, or is it not with Google? Does Google have something to say to IFLA or vice versa, or should IFLA rather speak with Wikipedia, which still has some project of having portals and a rational? All these to me are real questions, are the real questions. So the last point, I did also attend with this in 2003. I was one of the few journalists to attend it. Why? In Geneva, which is the core of the UN system, with hundreds of journalists, were there no journalists. I felt strongly, let's say, constrained, uneasy with Article 19. We had Ronald Coven, maybe you remember, who said that the main crucial issue is Article 19. We all know, even Hitler knew, even Idi Amin Dada know that cutting the tongue of journalists is not good for the freedom of information. So this kind of, cliche, like Irina Bokova, whenever you would ask her a question, she would also always talk of the Egyptian woman or things like that, is a way not to address the real issue. The real issue, as I felt them as a lone journalist in 2003, was the power of the media vis-à-vis other actors, without the freelancer, vis-à-vis new actors who would like to take avail of that opportunity not to be blocked by the institutional media. I am not going to list you the catalog, but to me, Article 19 was a way to preach the gospel, formal gospel of the system, and silence the voice of those who wanted to address real system. We live a time of disintermediation of all institutions, especially in the field of culture. The media have had to pay the price for that. So, and development and access to information. Development is the goal of humanity for the past 200 years, and all development theories have failed, by the way. Access to information is a religion of the world since Bacon and since Galileo, etc. So this is really, for me, the arch cliche. In theory, it sounds good. We have been trying to implement it for centuries, and all the recipes we advocate usually are the wrong ones and bring to failure. So you understand that the freelancer, who is of course a bit paranoid and hysterical, because that's the only way to have a voice vis-à-vis all respectable people and institutions, you understand that I disagree with officialdom on nearly every count. And if other journalists may agree with you, they have to come. Unfortunately for you, you are stuck with the only unreasonable one, and I am here, but next time you can ask me to leave the room before the start of the workshop.
Thank you.
And I attended IFLA conference throughout in Lyon for 1 week.
And well, I would never, I would want to thank everybody. I would never ask anybody to leave the room.
Some institutions in Switzerland, official ones, did recently.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I think thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure to have such a heterogeneous group of people, and we're here if you want to talk to us. And thanks again, and enjoy your lunch.
Finish.
Thanks, David. I will make sure I actually try and kill that French guy. If we find him like
Place there is no people, huh?
I'll take responsibility. Yeah, no,
Try to find out the jacket.
Terrific. Thank you. Sorry, I told her that the IGF has decision on like that. But anyway,
Even our ambassador.
thank you so much for taking part. What I'll do is I will share notes.
Let's see.
So you can say this. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I hope that the YouTube and everything is working for the rest of the conference.
Did I say
Good.
something?
Okay, that's a start. Perfect.
I never attack anybody. Just say this is the reality. Yeah, yeah. I would like to go. I would like to meet some people.
Here in the room?
Yeah, yeah. So did you check everything I have taken?
No, not yeah. I
So you're coming to the dinner as well tonight? I'm the one organizing the dinner for local access and I just check on July.
I think we're on the list. Where is it again?
It's called La Romana, it's very close to the CIAC.
Perfect. Yeah. Cool.
So I've been talking to Vico Pace, which is doing kind of understanding we can explore ways of it's more about how we can create synergies for, like identify spaces where different actors can
That's why I was sharing that David, I guess.
No, it looks very interesting.
No, exactly. Well, no. Well, I think, yeah, there's the word freelance. Quite similar.
It would be great if we can. I was actually putting in mind if tomorrow we find some time, I don't know if the unit is going to be more conducive environment in YouTube.
How many people do you have?
It's going out of hand, like, now, we didn't know Maria was here, so Managa. No, but this is happening like one after another. So no, maybe a space during the unit, if not, maybe tomorrow morning. Maybe we can just see there is interest going on, and then after a couple days we should have a Zoom room, we can have a more specific.
We'll also when people are running around.
Yeah, exactly. So tonight is more about people meeting together, and they're saying that Nico started the baby with you last year.
Yeah, no, this is very many.
So creating spaces where creativity around this topic can emerge. It's not a particular.
That's perfect. No, I'm really glad. I'm really glad to meet you. Yes. So it's mainly Deborah and Henrietta running the agency, so it's good to meet people working elsewhere in the world.
I recently joined.
Oh, good for you. You joined the right side. See you this evening then. Thank you.